All right, so we are working on the back of your vocab sheet today. And like I said, if you weren't able to print it out, maybe you're going to take notes based off of what I have on the screen. So just write everything that we go over on a piece of notebook paper. But we're actually going to start today with something that you guys already know, which is the verb manger. So manger is pretty much an ER verb. There's a little bit of an exception to it. And so first of all, we should know the meaning of manger. Manger means to eat. And we should know how to conjugate manger because it is an ER verb. So what I want you to do is you're going to fill in the conjugations for manger based on the fact that it's an ER verb, but I'm going to remind you that there is one weird exception to it. So we'll go through the forms in a second and I'll explain that exception in case you don't remember exactly what it is. So the forms of manger are je mange, e, tu manges, es, il, elle, on mange avec e, nous mangeons, E-O-N-S. This is our exception. Normally with an ER verb, we take off the ER at the end and we replace that with es, ONS, except we have a problem here. If we just had G followed by ONS, G followed by O makes a G sound, like the word go. And that would mean that we would pronounce that word mangon. And mangon does not sound very nice. So remember, the new form of this verb is a little bit different. Anytime you have a GER verb, GER verbs always add an E before the ONS. So this is the only form in which we're going to have an exception. Now the E is there simply to soften the G sound. That's all it does. It doesn't actually make a sound itself. It's just telling us that even though we have G-O, we're separating that. And think of it as pronouncing mange with the E and then on, mangeons. Okay? The other forms are normal. Vous mangez, you eat. Il ou elle mange, E-N-T. Now remember that even though this form is longer, this one sounds exactly the same as the forms over here. So mange, 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 mange. Okay? E-R makes the A sound. E-Z also makes the A sound. And there, of course, we're pronouncing the ONS. So manger should be a review for us. You've also seen several examples of the verb boire so far. Now, what does the verb boire mean? Boire means to drink. Now, this one I already have filled out on your vocab sheet for you, and I have it filled out because it's a weird irregular verb and it doesn't come up that often, so it's not one that I'm going to hold you accountable for knowing. So the forms, just so we can go through pronunciation, are répétez je bois, tu bois, il boit, elle boit, on boit, nous buvons, vous buvez, ils boivent, elles boivent. Okay, so we can see it's a weird irregular verb. The singular forms over here start like the infinitive B-O-I. The letters O-I together in that order always make a wa sound. And then we just add S-S, te to the end. Of course, we're dropping off the last two letters, just like we do with ER verbs. We do the same thing with verbs that end with RE. Except this one's an exception because we totally changed the beginning over here. It starts with B-U-V instead, but then we use our normal endings, O-N-S, O-Z. This one here is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of like how I explained the verb vouloir, in that we're starting with the beginning that we had over here, but then how we had a V in these two forms, we're using that V in this form as well, okay? So bois, 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 buvons, buvez, boivent. So I have that on there basically just as a reference for you. It's not something that I'm going to expect that you know perfectly, but that's how you say I drink, you drink, he drinks, we drink, etc. Now, Manger specifically means to eat, and boire specifically means to drink. But there is another verb that we're going to be using that can actually encompass both of those, and that's the verb prendre. So we've seen a few examples of this before already in this unit with some of our phrases maybe. Prendre has a couple different meanings depending on how it's used. The absolute most basic meaning that I want you to know is to take. So if I say like, I am going to take away your phone, okay? Prendre means to take. However, it has a special meaning with the vocabulary that we're using right now. Because with food and drink, prendre means to have in the sense of to consume, okay? So if you're saying, oh, I'm going to have a hamburger, what you're really saying is I'm going to eat a hamburger, I'm going to order a hamburger with the purpose of then eating it. Or I'll have a Coke, meaning I'm going to order a Coke and then drink it, or simply I'm going to drink a Coke. So prendre with food and drink translates as to have, the idea being to consume, to take into your body is kind of the idea. So I want you to know both of these meanings because the way that we use it with food and drink, I'm going to translate it as to have. But in other contexts, you'll see the verb prendre where it means to take. So it's important that you understand both of those ideas, okay? Now, one thing I want to make sure that we understand is there's another verb that means to have, and it's one that you learned earlier this year. The verb avoir means to have, but that means to have in the sense of like to own or to be in possession of. So if I say I have a pencil, I would say j'ai un crayon, okay? It's in my hand. That's different than this type of have. So if I'm using it with food and drink, saying I have a hamburger, like I already have it, it's in front of me, that would be j'ai un hamburger. But if we want to say I'm having a hamburger, like I'm going to eat a hamburger, then we're going to use our verb prendre, and it would be je prends un hamburger. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take off this RE at the end, and I'm going to replace that RE with an ending. And we're going to use the S ending on the je form. We're also going to use that S ending on the tu form. There are a lot of verbs that you'll learn from this point forward where the je and the tu forms are exactly the same. So it's kind of a two for one deal. So je prends, tu prends. Il, elle, on is going to start exactly the same, but we're not going to put anything at the end. We're just going to leave it with D as the last letter. Okay? So je prends, I take or I'm having. Tu prends, you take or you're having. Il prend, he takes or he's having. Now, when we get over here to the plural forms, we have some weird exceptions going on. The singular forms started exactly like the infinitive. So P, R, E, N, D, and then we dropped the RE to replace it with something else. In the new form, we are no longer going to be using that letter D anymore. It's going to go away. We're just going to start with the first four letters. So it's going to be nous prenons. We're still going to use that ONS ending that we're used to, but we've dropped the D from it. So nous prenons. Now, if we know the new form, quite often we know the vous form already. The vous form is vous prenez. Prenez avec EZ. So same thing, just the first four letters of the infinitive and then our ending. Now the il, elle plural form is like an extra exception. These are an exception because we dropped the R, we dropped the D. This one is like a double exception because not only have we lost the D, but now what we're going to do in this form is we're going to double the N. So we pronounce this ils prennent. Okay, the ENT, remember, is always silent. We don't hear that part, but we have a double N, so we're going to make sure that we hear that N sound nice and clearly in that form. So our plural forms are nous prenons, we take or we're having. Vous prenez, you take or you're having. elles prennent. They take or they're having. Okay? So, pronunciation. Here we go. Répétez. Je prends. Tu prends. Il prend. Elle prend. On prend. Nous prenons. Vous prenez. Ils prennent. Elles prennent. So we're going to do one quick little practice with this here in the video, and then I have one other thing to introduce to you about this. We're going to use that verb prendre to complete each sentence. So what I'm going to have you do is on another piece of paper, you're going to write down which form of prendre would go in each sentence so you can practice spelling it using your notes. But I also want you to think about what does that sentence mean, okay? So we're going to pause here. You're going to think through the meaning of the question of the sentence, put in the correct form of prendre, but also in your head or on paper if you want to, think about or write down what does that sentence mean. So, numéro 1, qu'est-ce que tu prends au petit déjeuner? What are you having for breakfast? Numéro 2, je prends du bacon et des œufs. I'm having bacon and eggs. Marianne et Lucie, qu'est-ce que vous prenez? Marianne and Lucie, what are you having? Notice we're using the vous form here because we're talking to more than one person. Numéro 4, nous prenons une tartine avec de la confiture. We are having a tartine with jam. Numéro 5, Patrick aime prendre un chocolat chaud. Ooh, exception. Why is it that we did not conjugate the verb prendre here? Why did we leave it exactly as it is? In this sentence, aime is already our conjugated verb. So when we put another verb after it, we leave it in the infinitive. So this sentence means Patrick likes to have a hot chocolate. So remember, when we have two verbs together, we only conjugate the first one. The second one is going to stay in the infinitive form. Numéro 6. Élise prend du thé et un croissant. Numéro 7. Les chiennes prennent un bol d'eau et des biscuits. The dogs have a bowl of water and biscuits. Okay, so prendre in the general sense means to take. With food and drink, quite often we translate it as meaning to have. Now, prendre is a weird irregular verb, but prendre has a couple of friends that I want you to know about as well. And the beauty of this is that if you know how to conjugate prendre, you also know how to use these four verbs as well. Now, one of these we've talked about before, and I bet at least one other one you can take a guess on. So take a look at these four verbs and see what you might already know the meaning of. The verb apprendre means to learn. So you could say, j'apprends le français. I am learning French. Comprendre, we've seen before. Comprendre means to understand. It looks kind of like the English word comprehend. So if we were in class and I was explaining something, I might ask you, vous comprenez? Do you understand? Reprendre is really quite easy because it's simply prendre with the re prefix. Now, just like in English, that re prefix means to do something again. So reprendre means either to take again or to take back. In the sense of food, it would mean to have more. So je reprends des croissants means I'm having more croissants. Okay? And then surprendre, kind of close to the English a little bit, is to surprise. Surprendre means to surprise. So the beauty of this is if you know how to conjugate prendre, which now you do, you can conjugate any of these verbs because they all contain prendre. We change the form of it exactly like we would do with the base verb prendre. It's just that we're going to have a few extra letters at the beginning. So we're going to do a quick practice with this today. So we're going to do a multiple choice activity, make it nice and easy on you here. You need to figure out A, B, or C, which of those is the correct answer to go in the box. And once again, what is that sentence saying or what is that question asking? So, numéro 1, qu'est-ce que vous prenez au dîner? What are you having for dinner? Numéro 2, il comprend le français et l'allemand. He understands French and German. Now, your verb for A would also make sense here. Apprendre means learn, but this one isn't in the right form for us to use it because the il form doesn't end with an S. So you have to pay attention to the meaning as well as the conjugation. Numéro 3, Mona et moi, nous prenons une pizza avec du coca. In this case, all three of the verbs were in the new form, so we had to think exclusively about the meaning here. And our meaning would be Mona and me, or Mona and I. We would say in English, we are having a pizza with Coke. Numéro 4, Sabine et Georges reprennent des sandwichs. Ils ont très faim. So A and say would both work in terms of the form, but only A makes sense. This sentence means Sabine and George are having more sandwiches. Essentially, they are re-having sandwiches, is kind of what it says. And the reason we know that that would make sense is because of the second sentence. Ils ont très faim. They are very hungry. Numéro 5. Alice ne comprend pas la question. Alice does not understand the question. So that's a little practice with prendre and some of its friends that are conjugated the same way.